It's two-thirds of the land. You cannot ignore two-thirds of your land.
The ground here cracks like old pottery. Summer hits 113 degrees Fahrenheit. The water beneath this desert is hot enough to scald a human and salty enough to kill wheat in 72 hours. And yet, 2,300 feet underneath one of the most agriculturally worthless stretches of land on Earth, 1 million tropical fish are swimming in that water right now, on purpose. So, how is any of this possible? The water that shouldn't exist.
We need to find the right solutions. We develop the right technologies for the desert.
1973. A geologist named Eleazar Isar is running routine surveys of rock formations beneath the Negev desert. His team is drilling, expecting dust, maybe limestone, probably nothing of interest. Instead, they punch through 2,300 feet of solid sandstone and strike water. And it isn't just any water. The water didn't need to be pumped. It erupted upward on its own. Pressurized for millions of years, it rocketed to the surface completely unassisted, a self-flowing artesian, well-powered by nothing but the weight of the earth above it. The team watched it climb the borehole on its own, a column of water older than human language, breaking out of stone after 20,000 years of silence. The team didn't know it yet, but they had just tapped the Nubian aquifer.
The desert, and specifically the Negev desert, have always played this key role in the story of the Jewish people in this land.
One of the largest underground water reserves on Earth. It stretches beneath 4 countries and holds an estimated 150,000 cubic kilometers of water, enough to fill Lake Superior 40 times over. The water itself is ancient. Geologists call it fossil water, rain that fell on the Sahara when it was still grassland 20 to 40,000 years ago during the last ice age. As the climate shifted and the desert spread, that ancient rainfall got trapped in porous sandstone. It had been sitting there, completely untouched since before humans discovered fire. Israel had found an ocean beneath the desert, but this ocean had 2 problems. Problems so significant that they made the water, by every conventional standard, completely useless. The 2 fatal flaws. Problem 1 was temperature. When you drill 2,300 feet into the Earth's crust, geothermal energy takes over. The water in that aquifer had been slowly heated over millennia to a constant 99 to 104 degrees Fahrenheit, the temperature of human blood. You can't drink water that hot. The thermal shock alone destroys root systems. Problem 2 was salt. After sitting in rock for tens of thousands of years, the water had dissolved minerals from every layer it passed through, about 1/10 the salinity of the ocean. That sounds manageable. It isn't. It's more than enough to kill wheat and virtually every commercial crop within days. Israeli engineers tested it on experimental plots. Within 72 hours, plants showed visible stress. Within 2 weeks, most were dead. The logical conclusion was to cap the well and walk away. The frame shift.
Today, the Negev makes up more than 2/3 of the landmass of this country.
But a handful of researchers stopped trying to fix the water, and they asked a different question. What kind of animal was already built for this? In the tropical rivers of Australia and Southeast Asia lives the barramundi, a prehistoric-looking fish with silver scales and a powerful jaw that humans have been eating for 40,000 years. Its natural habitat is river mouths, where fresh water meets the sea, naturally brackish, salinity that fluctuates constantly with the tides. The barramundi's body evolved to handle exactly that kind of chaos. And barramundi are tropical. They thrive in water between 79 and 93 degrees Fahrenheit, almost exactly the temperature of the Negev aquifer. In other words, the conditions that made the water lethal for crops were the same conditions barramundi spend their entire lives chasing. Researchers identified 2 more candidates. Tilapia, which can tolerate salinity 5 times higher than the Negev water, and European sea bass, which migrates between freshwater and marine environments naturally. All 3 were biologically designed for conditions that would destroy any conventional crop. But the deeper revelation came when they looked at what would happen once the fish started living in those tanks. A single barramundi eats roughly 3% of its body weight every day. In a pond with 100,000 fish, that's tons of feed converted into ammonia. Ammonia burns gills. It's a poison. Every fish farm on Earth treats it as the central waste problem to solve. But ammonia isn't waste to plants. To plants, ammonia is nitrogen. the single most important nutrient for growth on Earth. Farmers across the world pay enormous amounts of money for synthetic nitrogen fertilizer, manufactured in chemical plants using natural gas through a process called Haber-Bosch. That process alone consumes roughly 2% of the entire world's energy supply, one of the most energy-intensive industrial operations on the planet, just to produce the nitrogen that makes crops grow. It is one of the largest line items in global agriculture. The fish weren't producing waste. They were producing organic, nitrogen-rich, premium-grade liquid fertilizer for free, continuously. As a byproduct of just being alive, the engineers realized they didn't have a pollution problem. They had a resource distribution problem. And they were sitting on 3 industries worth of free inputs hidden inside what everyone else called a disaster. If hidden systems like this are your thing, hit that subscribe button. The next one is wilder. Drop a comment with the strangest engineering fix you've ever heard about. Building the closed loop.
Every substantial story in the story of our people happens in the desert. Both the people and the modern-day state of Israel.
In the early 2000s, the farms went up. Kibbutz Mashabei, Seideh, and Aquatech Fisheries broke ground on massive earthen ponds and concrete tanks across the Negev. They drilled wells, installed pumps and aeration systems, and began filling those tanks with barramundi, tilapia, and sea bass. The fish adapted almost immediately. For them, the water felt like home. Within months, the Negev had become one of the most productive fish farming zones in Israel. Kibbutz Mashabei Sadeh now operates ponds across 30 acres. Aquatech Fisheries expanded to 49 acres, with annual production exceeding 2,000 tons. A single pond holding 264,000 gallons can support thousands of fish at once. Then engineers built irrigation pipes directly from the fish ponds to the agricultural fields. The water flows out of the tanks, slightly cooler now because the fish have absorbed some of its heat, and into the root zones of olive trees and date palms. The crops absorb the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium from the fish waste. The soil itself acts as a living biological filter, with bacteria breaking ammonia down into usable nitrate, and tree roots steadily pulling nutrients from the ground. The first results shocked everyone. Olive trees grew faster than expected. Fruit yields on the experimental plots increased by 15 to 20% compared to conventional growing conditions. The trees were healthier than ones grown on premium farmland. The reason came down to delivery. Synthetic fertilizer dumps nitrogen into the soil all at once, and plants can only absorb so much at a time. The excess washes into groundwater, pollutes rivers, and triggers environmental damage. Fish waste breaks down gradually, releasing a steady stream of nutrients over weeks. As for the salt that everyone feared would destroy the trees, olive trees and date palms both evolved in the Mediterranean and Middle East, where soils are naturally saline. They tolerate salt concentrations up to 5,000 parts per million. The Negev water sits at 3,000, comfortably within range. When plants experience slight stress, they concentrate sugars and flavors. The dates were sweeter, the olive oil was richer, and long-term monitoring revealed one final surprise. Salt levels in the irrigated soil didn't accumulate over the years. The trees were absorbing salt and concentrating it in older leaves that dropped during pruning. They weren't just tolerating the brackish water, they were slowly desalinating the soil around them. The system had created a perfect closed loop. Water nourishes the fish, picks up their waste, feeds the trees, filters through the soil, and seeps back into the ground cleaner than when it left. Every output becomes an input. The economics nobody expected. None of this would matter if the numbers didn't work. And here is where the design becomes genuinely brilliant. Fresh water from desalination plants in Israel costs between 60 and 70 cents per cubic meter. For most crops, those margins are unsurvivable. Brackish water from the Nubian aquifer costs roughly 5 to 10 cents per cubic meter, a 90% discount. The drilling was a one-time investment made decades ago, and the artesian pressure does most of the pumping work. The fish farm pays a tiny amount to pump water up. They use it, the fish warm it and load it with nutrients. Then the agricultural operation takes the same water and gets free irrigation and free organic fertilizer in. A single delivery, no water bill, no waste disposal cost. The fish farmers don't pay to remove their wastewater. They sell it to the crop farmers as a premium input, Two industries that would normally compete for the same scarce water instead share it. Neither operation could sustain itself in this environment alone. Together, they thrive. Today, multiple farms across the Negev produce over 3,000 tons of fish per year. Israeli barramundi is exported to France, Germany, and the United Kingdom, competing on price with fish from Australia and Southeast Asia, because production costs with free heat are dramatically lower than anywhere else on the planet. Egypt has launched pilot fish farms using Israeli methodology in its western desert. A system born 2,300 feet beneath the Negev is now spreading to deserts across the Middle East and North Africa. The carbon picture is just as striking. Using geothermal heat instead of gas or electric heating saves the equivalent of 200 tons of carbon dioxide. The date palms and olive trees sequester additional carbon on top of that. The system isn't just carbon neutral, it's carbon negative. It removes more carbon than it emits. What this really means: the Negev didn't become productive despite being a desert. It became productive because it is one. The blazing heat that made the water undrinkable, the salt that destroyed every crop. They filtered the field down to exactly the species that could thrive. The ammonia poisoning the ponds turned out to be one of the most valuable agricultural inputs on the planet. Organic, free, endlessly renewable. Every condition that made the land hostile turned out to be a feature, once someone was willing to ask the right question. The conventional approach to developing desert land is to fight it, pump in fresh water, build greenhouses, override the climate. Israel did the opposite. They asked what the place was already perfect for, what the water already wanted to do. And then they built a system around the answers. The result is a farm producing premium fish, high-quality dates, and rich olive oil from land considered worthless, using water considered useless, in a system that gets more efficient the longer it runs. But here is the part that should keep you up at night. The Negev's conditions aren't rare anymore. Aquifers are draining worldwide. Soils are collapsing from decades of overfarming. Climate change is pushing more of the planet toward exactly the kind of place the Negev used to be: hot, dry, salty, apparently useless. Land that supported human life for centuries is starting to look like the desert that nobody wanted. The question is no longer whether the Negev model works. It does. It has for over 20 years in one of the most hostile growing environments on Earth. The question is whether the rest of the world can stop fighting its own deserts long enough to see what they were already built for, or whether we'll keep pumping fresh water into dying soil until both run out. What other useless thing on this planet might already be the answer to a problem we haven't asked the right question about yet? Drop your best one in the comments. And the next video on your screen goes 1,500 feet underground into something even stranger humans built where nothing should exist. See you there.